healthcare was a top issue for the Biden campaign, and it's going to be a top priority for his administration. He was thinking about passing a public health option. That's something that I don't see really happening with a divided government. I also see the ACA not really being too important, at least in the beginning of his administration, as it's currently sitting with the Supreme Court, and there isn't a decision expected until June on that. Some of the ground where a Biden administration could secede would be reversing some of the Trump era regulatory and executive actions that were set to hinder the effectiveness of the ACA. Some of these rollbacks would probably include reopening the ACA marketplace to the uninsured. I also see him expanding the ACA to maybe look at ways to remove Medicaid waivers, as well as looking at ways to increase subsidies for the ACA exchanges and increasing cost sharing for deductibles and copays.
It's really interesting. We were talking about rolling back the regulatory rollbacks, and there's another great example of where the president's going to take regulatory action in the absence of legislative action. And all those regulatory dials the Trump administration turned down, Biden's going to turn back up to 11. That's something both the insurers and providers are going to have to think about. The other big healthcare cost debate that we don't seem to be able to settle here in the United States is the price of pharmaceutical drugs and treatments.
It's definitely been a big issue for both campaigns the last election, and I see Biden's healthcare plan, at least what he said in his healthcare plan, he would like to be able to pass legislation that would allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with drug manufacturers. With a divided government, such a bill is highly unlikely. However, Biden may be able to find success building off the Trump administration's previous executive action and looking at ways to implement a most favored nation policy. That's a bill that uses an international reference pricing model that would allow the government to tie prescription drug prices covered by Medicare Part B to the most favored nation price paid by countries overseas. And this is something that the next administration can do without having to go to Congress.
Obviously, one of the big drivers of cost in manufacturing drugs and developing those cures is ensuring intellectual property and the ability to innovate. How do you see the next administration encouraging or discouraging that?
Everything that's happening with COVID-19, there's going to be a lot of new precedents set. I see the Biden administration coming in and being potentially more friendly towards IP because of the work that he's done with the National Cancer Moonshot Initiative in 2016. He was criticized for having the program allowing more evergreening, a strategy that is used to extend a patent's life. He's definitely been kind of a point of contention between him and the more progressive wing of his party. These are some of the key contentions that the next administration is going to have to face, on top of dealing with the new contracts that they're going to be making with more companies, because they do want to increase their funding for COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics. And so these companies that are going to be taking these funds should be noting those strings that are going to be attached to them. That's going to come in terms of transparency. The government's going to be stepping in and trying to set the price. These contracts are going to be highly scrutinized, as well as the patents that the companies are going to claim for these drugs, and should be expecting to see more activists filing Freedom of Information Act requests with the government trying to analyze those contracts. I expect to see more congressional scrutiny, including investigations and hearings on these contracts, as well as the rollout of the potential new COVID-19 vaccines.
The other aspect to bringing drugs to market is supply chain. And that's something that even before COVID hit was an increasingly debated topic broadly in trade policy about whether we should be making more products, including pharmaceuticals, here at home in the United States and buying American.
We've seen a realignment of the Republican Party, which has once been the defender of free trade. Because of the current administration's trade war with China, as well as COVID-19, they both kind of underscore the weaknesses in these pharmaceutical supply lines. Both parties are looking at ways to decouple from China, which currently produces a majority of all our generic drugs, as well as active pharmaceutical ingredients used in the United States.